Hey, how's it going? My name's Nish and you're watching The Word on Cars. Now, as you can see, I'm not standing in front of the car today. Instead, we're going to do an on-the-couch session where I'm going to take you through the top 11 Australian muscle cars that you may not have heard of. So, let's get to it. Now, us Aussies have always had a love for the V8 muscle car, a love that started way back in the 1960s. And that's partly thanks to the introduction of the Australian Touring Car Championship in 1960, which became the V8 Supercars Championship and is now the Repco Supercars Championship. The introduction of the championship created a need for the largest automotive manufacturers here in Australia at the time, Ford and Holden being the Aussie brand of General Motors, to homologate road cars for race use, which gave us Australians some of the most iconic cars ever produced. The Touring Car Championship was a race that stopped the nation and, like any race, created proper rivalries between people that have lasted for decades over which was the better brand, Ford or Holden. And even though Ford and Holden closed their doors, here in Australia, these iconic cars continue to captivate the hearts of us Aussies. So I'm going to take you back in time and show you these legendary cars, starting with the very first Aussie muscle car, the 1967 Ford XR Falcon GT. So, the XR Falcon GT dominated the Touring Car Championship in 1967 and was based on a Ford XR Fairmont. And even though it looked like an ordinary family sedan from the 60s, it was a sleeper. It had a police spec 168 kilowatt, 289 cubic inch V8, 4-barrel carbies, bigger brakes, retuned suspension, and a 4-speed on the floor. It was this car that kicked off the war between Ford and Holden on who could build the better muscle car. Today, expect to pay over 120 grand for an XR GT. Then we have the 1969 Holden HT Monaro GTS 350, which was based on the Monaro introduced in 1968 to take on Ford. Instead of a sedan though, Holden went straight for the jugular with this 2-door coupe, which won the famous Bathurst race in 1969. The GTS 350 got a 224 kilowatt, 350 cubic inch or 5.7 litre under the hood with revised suspension and brakes that was good enough for a 15.7 second quarter mile time and a top speed of over 200 kilometers per hour, which in the 60s was darn impressive. And price wise, one of these Monaros will set you back over 150 grand today. Then we have what is probably the most rare and iconic Aussie muscle car, the 1971 Ford XY Falcon GT HO Phase 3, which was based on the XY Falcon. What made this the ultimate muscle car was its claim to fame of being the world's fastest 4-door production car at the time. The GT HO, or GT handling option, managed to hit 100 kilometers per hour in just 6.4 seconds, a quarter mile in 14.2 seconds with a top speed of 225 kilometers per hour thanks to the 351 cubic inch Cleveland under the hood that cranked out 280 kilowatts and 513 newton meters, which is bonkers when you consider Ford gave Australia this performance sedan 53 years ago. And prices for these things are absolutely astronomical. The two cars listed for sale in Australia at the moment are priced at $850,000 and $1.1 million, which is one hell of a return on investment. Next, we have the 1977 Holden Torana A9X. Now, the A9X wasn't a special model in its own right, rather a performance package added to the Torana SS hatch and SLR sedan for homologation for racing use. And although the road versions didn't end up getting the race-bred fully upgraded L34 engine thanks to changes to emissions regulations at the time, it got a L31 5-litre or 308 cubic inch V8, better brakes, it was the first Holden to have disc brakes in the back as standard, radial tuned suspension and an induction scoop for the carby. The A9X is notably the best Torana produced with only 405 units rolling out of the factory, 100 coupes and 305 4-door sedans, so it's rare. So much so that in 2021, an A9X sold for a record price of 800 grand. Stepping into the 80s, and because of changes to racing regulation, Holden needed to produce a road-going race car, so they gave us this, the 1985 HDT VK SS Group A, also known as the Blue Meanie and based on the VK Commodore. To comply with the under 5,000cc regulation, which allowed the SS to race in a lower weight class, it had a D-stroked 5-litre V8, a Rochester 4-barrel carburetor, and cold air intake that cranked out a healthy 196 kilowatts and 418 newton meters. And aside from the obvious body kit and aero wheels, which you can get in silver or white, blue on white is the best combo in my opinion. It's on Bilstein suspension. If you want to buy into the history, you can find SS Group A's for between 120 and 275 grand, the higher end being for a SS in blue. Before the 80s ended, Holden introduced the 1988 HSV VL Group A Walkinshaw to homologate the VL Commodore for racing. And what a looker this car was. I remember growing up in the 90s and seeing these cars with their outrageous body kits on the road. It was the coolest thing. And if you're wondering, yes, the body kit was functional and said to reduce drag by 25%. The Walkie, as it's known, was built by the newly formed Holden Special Vehicles, or HSV, which is what AMG is to Mercedes-Benz, that replaced the Holden dealer team, otherwise known as HDT, with 750 of these beauties going to customers in this color called Panorama Silver. What's interesting is that some customers didn't like the body kit, so they asked for it to be removed before taking delivery. But those people are kicking themselves these days because values of these walkies have soared. So we'll be looking at spending well and truly over 200 grand for a piece of history. Under the hood, HSV dropped in a V8 that was just shy of 5,000cc to meet Group A regulations and was the first Holden V8 to include electronic fuel injection and twin throttle bodies, good for 180 kilowatts and 380 newton meters. And considering it weighed in at around 1,400 kilograms, this car could boogie. Moving into the 90s, the rivalry between Ford and Holden was hot, with Holden's HSV division cranking out homegrown muscle cars. So Ford responded with this, the 1997 Ford EL Falcon GT, which was based on the EL Falcon. Ford built 239 examples of the Falcon GT with the option of a manual or automatic transmission stuck to the back of a Windsor 5-litre V8 that was good for 200 kilowatts, 470 newton meters, and a top speed of 232 kilometers per hour. Interestingly, values of these GTs haven't shot up yet, so you can pick up one for around 50,000 Australian dollars compared to their 69 grand price tag when new. This next car takes us into the noughties and might look a little familiar to viewers across the globe. And that's because this 2004 HSV Coupe 4 was based on the Holden Monaro, which was exported globally as the Pontiac GTO, Chevy Lumina Coupe, or Vauxhall VXR. HSV decided to go a little unconventional on this one. It still got a thumping V8 under the hood that pumped out 270 kilowatts and 470 newton meters, but it wasn't rear-wheel drive like the rest of the HSV lineup. Instead, this one got an all-wheel drive system which was never done before and hasn't been done since. The issue at the time was that the all-wheel drive system made the Coupe 4 heavy, over 1,800 kilograms, and forced the engineers to use a 4-speed automatic and drop power and torque numbers from what the engine was making in other HSVs. And that made this the slowest of all the fast Holdens and Fords at the time, but it looked sensational in the 3 colors you could have it in, silver, black, or red, handled brilliantly, and with only 100 being built to order, it was bound to be rare. Compared to the $90,000 it cost when new, these days a Coupe 4 ranges anywhere between 100 to 150 grand, which isn't a huge increase, but I think these things will keep going up purely based on rarity. Next, starting the lineup for the teens is the 2014 FPV GT F351, which was based on the FG Falcon, which ended production in 2015. Now, FPV, or Ford Performance Vehicles, had been around since 1991, but it wasn't until 2002 that it became a standalone brand with Ford and ProDrive going into it together until it disappeared in 2015. So what we have here is the last FPV GTF, and boy, did it go out with a bang. Ford dropped the Boss 351 5-litre V8 with a supercharger strapped to it, which cranked out 351 kilowatts and 570 newton meters through either a manual or automatic, both with 6 speeds. This thing was a beast, and a gorgeous beast at that, and took the fight to HSV for one last session in the ring. These things sold for 78,000 Australian dollars when new, which seems reasonable now because these days expect to pay upwards of 120,000 or as much as 250,000 for the pleasure. Next up, and while we're on Ford, as a final hurrah before Ford stopped production in Australia, we got the Falcon FGX XR8 Sprint, which was based on the revised FG platform, which basically got a refreshed front and rear end and an updated interior. What was special about the XR8 Sprint though was the fact that Ford dropped a Miami 5-litre supercharged V8 into it that was good for 345 kilowatts and 575 newton meters on paper, with an overboost feature that in actual fact cranked out closer to 400 kilowatts and 650 newton meters in a family sedan. Ford also fiddled with the suspension and threw in Sachs dampers and Pirelli P0 tyres to give this fast Ford a firmer ride and point and shoot handling. All of this also meant a 0 to 100 sprint of 4.5 seconds and a top speed of 230 kilometers per hour for those school runs. And what cost under 60 grand for a manual, Ford also offered the Sprint with an automatic, will now set you back between 60 to as much as 155 grand depending on the kilometers on the clock. And with only 750 having rolled out of the factory, this is another muscle car that's bound to creep up in value. And lastly, we have Holden's final salute to the Australian muscle car, the 2017 HSV GT SR-W1, which was based on the Holden Commodore. This thing was carbon fiber clad with a 6.2 litre supercharged LS9, titanium connecting rods and intake valves and dry sump oiling, and a ridiculous 474 kilowatts and 815 newton meters. And to transfer all that power and torque into the rear wheels, HSV included a Tremec 6-speed manual transmission, trick suspension and Pirelli P0 Trofeo R tyres to make the W1 as close to a supercar as possible. In fact, HSV marketed the W1 as a race car for the road, and they weren't wrong. HSV built 300 of these monsters at an asking price of a shade under $170,000, but it's rumoured that some people paid as much as 300 grand to secure an order. And these days, W1s are listed from around $340,000 to close to $500,000. Oh, and HSV built 4 GTSR W1 Utes for 4 VIPs, with a few changing hands recently for over $1 million, which is absolutely insane. So, that wraps up the top 11 Aussie muscle cars. Let me know what you think about these icons in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel to see more content like this. Thanks for watching, have a great day, and I'll see you next time.